WCLU news coverage of the 2022 primary election is brought to you in part by HVAC Services in Glasgow.
Started out just trying to get a job out of high school, trying to get my foot in the door, trying to get a career started.
We try to be a successful business for our employees and a long-term employment for our employees.
And with this type of trade, and especially with HVAC services, the opportunities are endless.
I don't think there's a better company anywhere in Kentucky.
Well, continuing our 2022 election coverage for the primary here in Barren County, we're now going to speak to you today, Mr. Aaron Shirley, a Republican candidate for Barren County Jailer. How are you today?
Just fine. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us today. We're so tickled to have you, and of course, to really delve into what you're running for and just to get to know you. Of course, this project is a part of trying to promote transparency among all the candidates, to really talk to constituents and voters, and also just for folks to know who you are. You know, sometimes we go to the ballot and we see names, but we can't think of who that is or whatever, so we just really want people to be more educated. As far as it goes for you, you're running for jailer, which clearly is a county executive office there. You'll be heading the jail if you do win the election in November. Certainly have to make it through the May primary first as well. So tell us a little bit first about yourself, and then we'll get into more so why you're running for office.
Well, I am the co-owner and operator of RM Sealing and Striping out of Glasgow. Me and my wife owns a child education advocating service, also here in Glasgow. I manage 100 storage units out of Cave City, and I'm a special deputy with the Barren County Sheriff's Office.
All right. So you do quite a bit of things in the way of your work and all that sort of thing. What about some things outside of work? What are you involved with?
We still farm. You know, that's probably takes up most of our time away from work.
Right. You are running against a couple others on the Republican ticket, so certainly you do have some opposition, which is good though, because it shows many people are involved and want to be, you know, jailer in this case. So the jailer's race has really been one that has popped up, and several people are really interested in it. Why are you interested in it?
Well, I've got 3 points that kind of I went to looking at that made me really decide to run. One was our budget. I really want to see it kind of get back in bounds. We've kind of wavered away from that a little bit. 2 is our turnover rate. It's good to, we have a lot of people come in, but we need to retain the ones that we have. The turnover rate, I know COVID has made it hard on everybody. It made it hard on my businesses, but it seems like even pre-COVID, the numbers kept rising and rising and rising. I'd like to see that number come down. 2 is the drugs that's in the jail. Regardless who the jailer is, you're not going to get all of them out, but if we can make it minute, knock down on it some, if we could keep one person from overdosing, if we keep one person from being unresponsive, that's what we want to do.
All right. So those 3 points, let's break those down a little bit. Let's go to your third point, and let's work our way back, actually. So third point, you know, you mentioned drug overdoses and
Correct.
Drugs in the jail. What kind of knowledge are you possessing currently about the current status of that, or historical perspective on drugs in the Barren County Detention Center?
Well, everything I do, I pull open records for. You can go to the physical court, you can go to the Barren County Family Service, and you can do what they call an open records request. I just fill out a paper of what records I'm looking for, submit them. They either grant it or they don't. And one of the records I pulled was over ambulance runs to the jail from January 1, 2020 to December 31st, 2021. And the request, the way I'd done it, was either overdose, unresponsive, or medicals pertaining. And we had 54 runs in 2 years that just the ambulance took. That's not counting any that we may have took. We've got a tool up there, is what I like to call it. It's a body scanner that we have purchased, somewhere around a little over $200,000, that I think every person coming through should be run through that scanner. You're not going to catch everything, but if you just caught a little bit of it, that's that much more that's out of our jail.
Your other point too about turnover in the jail staff. You know, a big part of that could be the pay. Another part could be administration. Another part could be who are we recruiting. You know, there's a number of things that could influence that. What do you think is the biggest reason we have a lot of turnover, if we do have a lot of turnover?
The turnover rate, I went back and I'm big on numbers. So I went back and pulled 5 years. And we was running about 12 a year, either to retirement or corrections just went for them, to you know, transferred to other departments. In 2021, and the way I done my open records request was I requested the W-2s for individuals for 2021 who no longer work for the Barren County Detention Center. And just in 2021 was 45 people. So I went back and I pulled the national database for corrections, which covers your women's prisons, men's prisons, juvenile detentions, county jails, and it runs about 16.1% for 2021. So I pulled the state average. The state average run about 30%. Here at the detention center, we're running right at 180%.
Okay, and then you mentioned another point. Describe that a little bit.
The budget.
The budget.
We have a budget. Of course, if you look down, like last year we was $1,029,600 that had to be transferred in, what they call from other funds, which is the general fund. If you look at the bottom line item, of course I pulled the public records for the last 5 years on our budget, what we was budgeting for each item. And it seemed like they just kept increasing and increasing. And we just kept having to pull money out of the general fund to cover those bills. And I had a gentleman the other day ask me to kind of explain that. He said, if we look at the bottom line, what we're taking in versus what we're spending, it still looks like we're in budget. And about the best way I could explain it to him was, if I've got $500 and I budget it for my next month's bills at home, and I spend $100 on my home, $100 on my car, $100 on gas, $100 on water, and $100 on electric, I spent my $500, but I'm still within budget. If I get a cable bill for $100 and I go to any local bank and I borrow that money, I have debt acquired. I have to pay that back. But if you give me $100, I can put it toward that bill. It's showing I took in $600 and I paid $500 or paid $600. I'm still budgeted, but I'm not. I had to get that $100 from somewhere else. And it seems like that we're pulling from is out of that general fund, and it keeps going up and up and up. And what happens is that's all of our tax money that goes into that general fund is having to cover that bill.
Running a jail can be tricky, you know, especially from an outside perspective. Thinking about a jail, you know, you do have a few different revenue sources. We do. But there are a number of things. It seems like the jail is just this continuous burden financially. Talk about what your knowledge is on that, and perhaps maybe what are some thoughts you have about lessening that burden?
One thing that I have looked into, and I've talked to some jailers for other counties to kind of see what they was doing that was working. Not everything that they do is going to work for us. What things that they tried that worked, what things didn't. One of the things that when I talked to a few of them was federal inmates. You get so much a day for every inmate that you house, if it comes from Metcalf, Monroe, because we also house for them, or even from our own inmates. We receive so much money per inmate per day. With federal inmates, you also draw so much money, but it also opens you up to all federal grants. There are so many grants out there in the federal government. We have a grant writer that works for the county. They don't go looking for the grants. You have to find the grant and take it to them and say, this is what we'd like to apply for. They'll help you write that grant. That will help subdue some of that cost that we're having to pull out of the general fund.
Talk about your thoughts on promoting at least, you know, fair treatment for those that are housed at the jail.
Well, there's also so many programs out there. You know, at one time we had a garden program. I heard not long ago that they was talking about opening them back up. The morale of the inmates in there, if you can keep that morale up, it seems like the trouble rate goes down. Of course, I know they have alcohol treatment classes. There's so many classes out there, like I said, speaking to other facilities that are offered. that we could utilize, not only to help take care of them, but also make them better people for society when they get released, to kind of help cut down on that number of reincarceration.
What do you feel like is a convincing factor for you, considering that you, for lack of better words, aren't exactly experienced hands-on from the jail standpoint?
Well, number one is my budgetary side. I mean, that's ultimately, people hate to look at it this way, but it is a business, and that's where I'll take care of most of. As far as the hands-on, I worked as a court bailiff for a few years there at the courthouse, transporting. Actually, you know, they would bring them in, and you had so many that you had to take care of, take them to different facilities, whatever they needed. Then I became a special deputy over at the sheriff's office, which gives me some experience as far as out on the road with some of the great deputies that we have. I get to see firsthand how things are done, as far as even coming into the jail, as far as the intake and stuff. I've not worked on the floor. I've never worked inside the facility. I've had some great people approach me that are people with lots of experience that are anxious to come back, that will come with us, and that'll be my experience on the floor. And it's kind of like I've even told a couple of them, they'll actually probably train me more on the floor than I would them, and I'll make sure that this is taken care of.
You do have some opponents to get through the primary, and obviously if you make it through the primary, then perhaps the general election too, because there is one Democrat running.
Correct.
But when we talk about why someone should vote for you, in 30 seconds or so, why are you the right Republican candidate for Barren County Jailer?
Well, that's a good question. Never been asked exactly like it. My biggest thing is I want to be a good steward of their money, their taxpayers. I want to keep it down to where the money that we put in cannot be just for the jail. It can be for anything that we can use within our county. I'd really like to see it not be a burden on the taxpayers instead of making it more of a revenue for them.
All right, excellent. Well, we appreciate you coming in today to participate in this, trying to promote transparency among all the candidates and really get a good idea. So, Mr. Aaron Shirley, you're running for jailer in Barren County, and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, sir.